only be spoken, Lord Christ, and your word only be heard. Amen. This morning I feel the need for a word from God, a word of healing in what feels like a time of brokenness. If you're sensitive to human beings committing acts of violence against one another, you feel the brokenness, the reeling of so many after what happened in Paris this weekend, the acts of terror leaving over 129 people dead, over 350 people injured. That beautiful city of lights that so many of us love, full of art and culture, built along that winding river, the Seine, while dealing with this aftermath after these horrific attacks on innocent people. It's almost too much to comprehend, to absorb. A mother in Paris this morning doesn't want to take her baby in a stroller out to the city park. An exchange student, maybe from Fairfield University, studying abroad this fall, doesn't feel safe enough to go out and meet her friends tonight at the cafe on the corner. If we're honest, we might admit that we don't know how to stop the violence. This way of life that we thought was stable and reliable in Western nations, it feels out of control now in this age of terror we seem to live in. Mark's gospel speaks to the things that we thought we could depend on, things that we thought were reliable. Perhaps they aren't what they seem. Take those massive buildings in Jerusalem at the time of Jesus. The huge stones that were cut especially to build that temple, the great temple where he taught. The disciples are very impressed. They seem so permanent, so strong, those buildings with their great massive rocks. They were built to last forever, weren't they? But Jesus says, look, do you see those great buildings over there? Not one stone will be left standing. They will all be thrown down. He's sitting outside the city walls of Jerusalem, over on the hillside, the Mount of Olives. If you've ever been there, you know that you look out on a massive number of graves on one side. You see the huge city with the dome, the golden dome of the temple in the distance. It's an incredible view. He and the disciples from this vantage point have this amazing perspective on the city. And it's a place where women are carrying food home to make dinner, where children are playing in the alleyways, and old men sit on stools in front of their homes to chat with the neighbors. It's a scene of ordinary people going about their daily business, very peaceful. Do they have any idea that the great temple in Jerusalem will fall 30 years later, totally destroyed by the Roman Emperor Titus in the year 66? Do they know that their own most holy leader, the Messiah, sitting there with them, teaching them on the hillside, will be grimly executed in just a short time on a cross? You know, I've never liked this passage from Mark, chapter 13. It's called The Little Apocalypse, and it comes at this time of year, just before Advent begins. But we couldn't have asked for a better passage, perhaps, from our lectionary this weekend. I think we might be able to take some comfort from the words of Jesus, who says we must not be alarmed by these tumultuous times, because there will be tumultuous times ahead. And he speaks to us today as well as to his disciples back then. There will be earthquakes and tsunamis. There will be famines. All kinds of awful things happen. This is but the beginning of the birth pangs. A young French family lives only 2 blocks away from the Louvre Museum, near the statue of Thomas Jefferson by the River Seine. 2 attorneys, working parents with their 3 children, 8, 5, and 6 months old. And my daughter Perry was their au pair for the year of 2012, caring for these sweet children. She decided she'd make them a special Thanksgiving feast with all the trimmings, so she searched around in the marketplace trying to find sweet potatoes and marshmallows. She and this family remain very close. I know that many of you have connections all over the world, and many of you love this great city that we've traveled through. And like you, she felt that this was her city, her people. I think when we encourage our children to explore other cultures, to study abroad, to study other languages, it feels risky. Maybe, the way it felt risky to Hannah to give up her child and turn him over to the temple to raise him. I don't think I could do that. But when we do send our children off at an appropriate age to learn and study abroad, it does bring us deeper understanding of the worldwide human family. We are one. We are so much more alike than we're different. So I hope that we can keep that vision that Parisians are our brothers and sisters, just as New Yorkers an hour away to our south are our brothers and sisters. Just as the children of Syria are our children, the teenagers of Columbine, our children, the children of Newtown. We're one human family. Yet how is it in our brokenness that we polarize ourselves? We default to that fearful place in our minds we clutch and grab and operate out of that primitive part of our brain called the amygdala. According to neurologists, it's the same part of our brain that we share with reptiles. Still, Jesus says, even amid the destruction and the tumult of our own time, we have to remain faithful and loving people. We have to take that risk. And what will happen? Something new will be born. So I pray that we don't let scorn and fear, cynicism infect our hearts. With God, all things are possible, and we're promised that something new will emerge from the ashes. Just this weekend, you had delegates from this parish and your clergy go to diocesan convention outside of Hartford with 600 other members of the Episcopal Church in Connecticut. There are 600,000 Episcopalians in the state. And we've been reminded this weekend that our beloved church is heaving with change. The old institution with its great stones is no longer sustained by member pledges and the commitment that used to make our church so vibrant. So if today's church is going to thrive, it needs to reimagine itself. It needs to morph from maintenance to mission, from maintaining those great stones of our structures, our historic buildings, and become part of the 21st century, transforming into a network of shared systems and resources. Instead of competing with one another, sharing resources with one another, because we love our church and we want it to live. So we're being advised to get up and out of these buildings and find out what is God doing in the neighborhood. Then we're invited to go and participate in God's mission out there. These are part of our birth pangs, because it's here that we worship and here that we receive the spiritual strength to get up and to go out and serve. We have to keep the faith and the trust that God is with us, guiding our path to a new day of peace and fruitfulness. Like Hannah, a woman grieving because she longed so deeply for a child, and she was taunted for being barren. We could try being like her and put all our effort into prayer. She prayed with every ounce of her passion. God, if you would just give me a son, I will turn him over to your care and have him raised as a Nazarite, a holy person. And then a child was born to her. It was a miracle. So Hannah, being faithful, kept her promise to God and gave her son over to God's care, priestly care in the temple. And not long after he was born and turned over at the age of 2, the other priests in the temple became corrupt. But this child was named Samuel. He grew up to be one of the most faithful prophets, one of the greatest leaders portrayed in acting in the tumult, even though it may be hard to see, even though we may not understand what's going on, because the losses are so staggering, the contractions are so painful. My call to action this morning is that we try to be more like Hannah and pray through our losses, through the tumultuous changes we experience in our culture. We are people who need to pray for peace. And because prayer is said to be dispositive, not meaning negative, but dispositive in that it disposes us to act for peace. May we be bridge builders, cross-cultural bridge builders, restorers of the breach between internecine, interfaith breaches. Being God's people means that we know what forgiveness is. We have to practice it ourselves and act upon it wherever we go. And so today, our prayers do go out fervently to God this morning for all who died in France, for all